project Jeep combines two childhood dreams that I've had. The first one was owning one of these ride-on toys. Now as an adult, that's not too practical. But the second dream that I've always had was owning a gasoline-powered RC vehicle. Not a nitro one, but a legit gasoline one. So I thought I'd take those two childhood dreams and combine them into this project, and I think I nailed it. Welcome to Adventure RC1. My name is Greg, and this, of course, is episode 2 of the Epic RC Jeep project. For those of you who have missed episode 1, a quick recap is I'm converting a kid's ride-on Power Wheels over to full RC control with a proper controller. And this was originally operated off of a 12-volt battery, and the top speed is something like less than 3 miles per hour, and that simply isn't going to do. So I'm changing out the power plant from tiny little electric motors up to this nice, huge 50cc two-stroke engine. Since the first episode, I was able to get a lot of the pieces and parts that I need to complete this project on order. Those have all arrived, and let's check those out. In order to get these huge wheels on the Jeep turning, I ordered this huge 150 kg servo motor. It comes with this nice aluminum servo horn, and at my local hobby store, I was able to score this nice clearance price turnbuckle. On the engine, I've got a cable that I can modify to use as the throttle linkage, and I've got a nice drive sprocket and chain. From episode 1, I thought that this sprocket took a number 25 chain. That was incorrect. These types of engines actually take a chain called T8F, specifically for scooters and small electric vehicles. And to connect all of this power down to the Jeep drive shaft, I have this drive hub and some bearings. Normally I would upsize these much larger, but I'm using parts that are already on the Jeep. The brake system is a bicycle disc brake. The rotor is this huge 160 millimeter rotor. All right, there's a lot to get done in this episode, and to get started, I'm going to turn literally to the steering on the Epic Jeep. Right now the wheels on the Jeep don't turn very much, and that's because there's some little bent down tabs right here that limit or lock out the steering against this bracket. I'm going to have to remove all of this bracket so that I can pound these two tabs perfectly flat. I tried using a pliers, but this metal's actually pretty thick and I can't bend these flat by hand. Once that's complete, I'll take this huge servo motor, and I think it's going to mount somewhere down in this area. Then I can take this clearance price turnbuckle and get that mounted across something like that. I've pounded the stop tabs flat, and I've got a couple mounting holes drilled for connecting up the turnbuckle up to the servo. And now I can do the first initial test here. I'll just hold the servo motor by hand, and look at that, plenty of power. It's definitely slow, but right now I'm just looking for the power, and that looks like it's going to work out perfectly. One of the concerns that I have is all the power that this huge servo motor is going to need is going through this small receiver. In a future video, I think I'll break out the power leads and go directly to the battery and not have all the power going through the receiver itself. Check out these two mounting brackets that I made for the servo motor. They look pretty nice. We're also going to see that I have the mounting grommets installed that come with the servo motor, and normally I don't use the mounting grommets because it adds in a little bit of slop between the servo motor and the brackets. However, on this project, the two-stroke engine that's getting mounted up to the Jeep throws off a lot of vibration, and I want to isolate some of that out from the steering servo. And the other reason is this steering system doesn't have a servo saver. I couldn't find one large enough to fit this huge motor, so everything is direct link, and having these soft pads mounting up is going to give the servo motor just the tiniest little bit of give, and maybe that'll help save this huge servo motor. Everything's bolted up, and let's check it out. That looks pretty good. It is a little bit slow, but I am running that servo motor off of a 2S battery, so about 7.4 volts. When I actually go to run the Jeep, I'm going to be running it off of this 12 volt battery, so I'm going to pick up even more power and most of all, some more speed. It feels pretty good to have the steering working on the Epic Jeep. However, I think that's the easy part of this project. Next, I'm going to tackle something a little bit more difficult, and that is the drive axle on the Jeep. Right now, that axle really isn't meant to turn, and of course, I need that to turn freely so that I can drive some power from the engine down into this drive sprocket. For that, I'm going to be mounting that drive shaft to a couple of these pillow block bearings. Here's what the stock configuration of the Jeep would look like, and normally there'd be a hub that is driven by some little electric motors to drive the wheels back and forth, and the drive shaft goes through these two blocks, and inside these blocks are two springs to act as a shock absorber. Now I want to retain that feature, which means I'm going to have to take some of these brackets off and carve away some of the plastic so that I can mount the bearing on top. This saw did a great job of modifying this first block. Let's check it out. I'll pull out the first rudimentary shock. Here's an unmodified one, and we'll clearly see that all I did was just simply chop the top off. Next, I cut a slot through the mounting block. That way the bearing will fit down inside. All I have left to do is to put 2 blocks of wood so that this bearing has something to bolt to and still be able to use that rudimentary shock. After some more cutting, I have the bearing mounted up to the Jeep and the axle loosely placed through, and I still retain some of the stock suspension. I'll do the same thing on the other side. Both bearings are mounted up to the axle, and the Jeep has a little bit of suspension in the rear. Next, I need to connect power from the axle up to the wheel hubs. For that, I made this adapter yesterday. This socket fits up to that wheel hub, and on the other side, I have a flange mount. Looks something like this. This part looks a little bit tricky because it's got all these different radiuses, but the quickest way I figured out how to make this drive socket was to actually grab one of the original drive hubs off the Jeep and simply just do a tracing of that hub. Once I had that tracing, I was able to take that, go to the computer, scan it in, and import that image into my laser software, which is what I use to make this. We'll check that out now. I took the line tracing of the wheel hub and imported that into laser software called Lightburn, and I even drew a little line that was 1 inch long. That way I could make sure that the sizing of the hub was properly calibrated. From there, I was able to make this drive hub. I've got 2 of them that'll be stacked up, and I've got these little pilot holes for some screws because I'm going to be gluing and screwing all of this together. On the end, I've got the cover for the wheel hub adapter, and in the center, I've got the mounting pattern for that metal mounting flange we just saw. I'm going to be using a CO2 laser machine to be cutting all of these parts, and all of the other adapter parts we'll be using on the Epic Jeep project. Before I cut out of the actual material, I like to go and use some poster board and do some test cuts to make sure that everything fits correctly. This laser machine makes quick work of complex parts. If you'd like to know more about this laser machine, I'll have a link down in the video description. A few minutes later, and I have 2 identical drive hubs. Next, I need to attach the drive sprocket up to the axle along with the disc brake. I've got another set of these flange mounts and the material that I'll be using to attach these up to the different accessories. I'm going to be using some blue 1/4 inch acrylic, and I'll be using the same CO2 laser machine. These laser cut parts look absolutely awesome. Everything is loosely pieced together. This is originally what I had envisioned. Now that it's all kind of mocked up, I'm finding that the width of everything is too wide for the actual axle. That means I'm going to have to think about this for a little bit, and most likely this drive sprocket will have to go directly onto the drive hub, and the same thing for the disc brake going on the opposite drive hub. After a lot of thought and a lot of work, everything's attached to the axle and it looks great. And now it's time for what I think is going to be the hardest part of the project, and that's attaching the engine up to the Jeep. The engine placement is a question that I had all the way back to episode 1. I was originally looking at putting it underneath the hood. I thought it'd be really fitting to, have the engine underneath the hood. However, I ran into a couple roadblocks, including this hood doesn't actually fold up. While I could cut it out and get it to fold up, that brings up the other questions of, does this actually fit underneath? And then more importantly, the drive line or the chain is going to be below the chassis line going out to the rear axle. And maybe that would be okay if I was just using this on road, but I'm going to be taking this off road. It is a Jeep after all. And out by me, I've got a lot of sand, and in that sand are sticks and twigs and stuff, which I think would constantly get jammed up in the sprockets and the chain. The other option I have for mounting the engine is right here in the middle of the Jeep, and this would make perfect sense because it would equally distribute the weight between the front and the back of the Jeep. However, once again, it's going to put the chain line below the chassis line where it can again pick up all that sand and all those sticks, and I really don't want that. The other thing that I don't like is we're going to be able to see that big bright red engine through the side doors on here, and I don't want that. I want to have this be a little bit more scale realism, so that's going to put the engine all the way back here to the back of the Jeep where the seat would normally be, and it would help keep it hidden. Let's check that out in a little bit closer detail. All right, let's see how this is going to work out. This is about where I think the engine's going to sit. It, of course, is going to sit much lower right now. It's just resting on top, but it's actually going to be much lower down here. And this end of the gearbox is actually going to be poking through the plastic, or the space-age composite material. And that drive sprocket will end up poking through the wheel well somewhere in this area, and the drive sprocket on the axle is just down below. So I think that's going to work out pretty well. This also means there's some electronics underneath that engine from the Jeep that I'm going to have to relocate, and there's going to be a lot of plastic or space-age material that I'm going to have to kind of carve and cut out of the way. So my idea on that is to carve a little, measure, cut some more, and cut some more, because I can't really put back what I take away. Once again, I'll be breaking out my saw for this job. I'll check back periodically to show you the progress. Some blue painter's tape will help me mark out with this black permanent marker where I should start cutting, and if I make a mistake, I don't have that black marker all over this nice Jeep. After a whole lot of cutting, the engine is finally bolted in. Right now, it's just the front of the engine that's bolted up to the Jeep. I still have to make a bracket up to support the back end of the engine, but so far, this is looking pretty good. Inside the wheel well, I've got the drive sprocket from the engine. Down below, I've got the counterpart sprocket going down to the axle. Hopefully we can see that. Those do line up perfectly. Inside the engine bay, I have the back engine support installed. That's right down there. And everything is looking good. I've got the throttle linkage all set up and sorted out. And I've got the throttle and the brake all on one servo right down here. And I just got done ordering an exhaust deflector to go right here, so I'm not filling up this area with all of the smoky, oily residue from the two-stroke oil. For this video, it'll just have to do without one. All that's left is the easy stuff like the final placement of the radio receiver, the power switch, and some servo extensions, and of course getting the rest of the accessories bolted onto this Jeep so it looks fully complete. It's a beautiful morning to take this epic Jeep out for its maiden drive. I'm pretty excited. Now, there's still a lot more little details to do on here, but the basics of getting the Jeep up and running are all complete. Oh, lost the chain already. The Jeep makes it about 10 feet before that chain falls off. I'm going to have to make up a chain guide and get that fitted. I'll be back in just a second. What I thought was a quick fix to keep the chain derailing ended up being really involved. The first thing that I checked was, in fact, this drive sprocket was out of alignment down to the bottom. I fixed that. The chain still derailed. I then realized that I made a monumental error when I allowed this drive shaft to have some suspension when I placed the motor directly above it. Anytime the suspension worked, it put a tremendous amount of slack in the chain, and of course, it's going to derail, so I basically locked out the suspension. And the next step was to install a chain guide. I made this one out of the blue acrylic that I've been using, and of course cut it out on the laser machine. The chain now is fully captivated. This time, it's gotta stay on that drive sprocket. While the chain derailing mess was happening on this side, this other side had some issues too. This drive hub and the disc brake kept on coming loose down to the drive axle. So I went down to the flange down there that was being held on with some set screws or grub screws. I pulled those out and replaced them with some cap head screws. That way I could use a lot bigger wrench to really tighten those screws down. With all these new updates applied, let's go give it another go. Well, that was definitely a lot of fun, minus the chain derailments, but overall, it's pretty crazy to see this huge ride-on toy bombing around through the front yard with a big 50cc engine on it. Well, we are coming near the end of this video. I'm far from being done working on this Project Epic Jeep. There's a lot more things I need to do. Definitely, I need to get the chain sorted away in the back. I thought I was going to make some more guides, but I think what I need to do is actually invest in a proper chain tensioner. That way, as this thing is bouncing around with essentially no suspension, I can keep that chain in the back under control. The other thing that happened on that last run, which is also why I stopped, is I broke the steering turnbuckle in the front. That was aluminum and plastic, and of course the aluminum survived, but the plastic ends of that turnbuckle, one of them snapped right off, which is telling me that these wheels are sending a lot of force up through to that servo area, and while that metal gear digital servo survived, I do want to install a servo saver, and prior to this video, I did look for one, but because that servo is so large, I couldn't find one with an 18-tooth head on that servo. If you know of one, let me know down below by leaving a comment. And while I'm standing next to the Jeep, we get a scale of the size of this thing. It really is big from head to toe. It really is about 4 feet long and about 2 feet wide. In comparison, when I grab this 10th scale monster truck, just look at the size comparison. The wheels on here are nearly taller than this 10 scale Armagorgon. Do you want to see more videos on the Epic Jeep? Do you want to see more project videos just like this one? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for joining me in this video. I had a blast creating this content for you. And don't forget to show this video some love by giving it a like, subscribe to the channel, or ring that notification bell. Not only is it a great way to help this channel grow, it's an awesome way to connect video content like this with other RC enthusiasts just like yourselves. And until we meet again in the next video, keep on rolling.